Okay, thank you. There's still some of you joining, but let's start. So, can you hear me? Okay? Okay, nice. So, actually, this is the second time I'm here in Moscow, because in 2010, I was here as a dancer, because I'm a Latin dancer. If I'm not testing, then I'm dancing. And just to shake your hand and showing something absolutely different than testing, I prepared some video for you. Thank you. Спасибо. Okay, so just a small technical break. Okay, now it's maybe better, at least for the video. Okay, so my name is Árpád Tóth, and I come from Hungary, Budapest. Have you ever been in Budapest? Raise your hand. Okay, not so much. And the company called Evertest, what I represent. And I'm the CEO, but I'm coming from the technical side. And actually, our most popular service is the test automation and performance testing. We had no experience about usability until 2015. And on that time, I executed a survey. Through LinkedIn and Facebook, whatever, I collected answers through a Google form. And I tried to get some information about future customers. Okay, something like a market research. And some typical questions about what size of your company, do you have dedicated testers at all, and so on. And there was a question about what type of testing do you need, if you need any. Because probably you are experienced that there are software projects without any testing. And I thought that the most popular testing types required, based on this survey, will be the test automation and the performance stuff, so the technical stuff. And surprisingly, the demand for UX/UI testing was the same as the test automation. The root cause was because we targeted smaller companies, so especially startups, so 7, 10 people and so on. And if you think about mobile applications and fancy new web applications, the usability is crucial, especially for startups. And at that time, we started thinking about that, why it's so important, what is the root cause why the startups and small teams want this. And we start learning and read books and start some pilot projects and start working on these kind of projects. And before we dive into the deep, I want to declare that I'm not a usability expert, but I want to share my experience from these past 2-3 years. So if you search about what the usability is, you will find tons of definition about that. This is a process, this is a set of techniques which improve the user satisfaction. But I think the usability is almost everything which is support the overall experience of a usage of a product. And if we dive into the deep and dig into the history of the user experience, in the industrial design, there were books, there were different achievements, but from the software point of view, I want to highlight one man and one story. The first man who wrote to his business card that he is a user experience architect was a researcher. And he revealed two very important points. The one point, the first, is if the users like your product, they will buy it. And the second one is that even for higher price. Even for higher price. It's not obvious, okay, it's not trivial, even right now. So, okay, if an application has a great usability, the users will buy it because they like it, but even for higher price, it's not trivial, but it's very, very interesting. And yeah, there are researches about this. And this guy had been working in many companies, but the first company who has adopted his thoughts and his rules now is the biggest company in the world. The man was Dan Norman, and the company was the Apple. So probably from this point of view, maybe we have more understanding than why these Apple products are pricey and why they are focusing on the usability. And this time we were in 1993. So can you imagine when you try to persuade a developer that yes, the button, the size of the button or the words what you used when you communicate with the users does matter? Even right now, usability and many times and many ways are ignored. But the point is, this is extremely business effective and business sensitive characteristic. Actually, he is. And if you put his name in the Google, the most famous book is The Design of Everyday Things. And he collected many contradictory and funny objects with poor usability. I try to also collect some of them for you. It's not from their book, it's just I try to collect. One of my favorites is this Otis Elevator. Okay, so if you want to go up, maybe you prefer this or this. Based on experience, you will reveal, but it's of course confusing. The next one, when everything is here, but it's still confusing. So finally, you find a toilet, and the text is contradictory with the sign. So from one point, you will stop and start thinking, which is an energy, and you don't want to burn any energy. This is my favorite one. Buy any 2 drinks and pay for them both. Actually, it's nothing to do with the usability, but this one is a game. So it's probably a bar or a breakfast place or whatever. Nordic design with Japanese handcrafts. Nowadays it's interesting, but again it's confusing. It stops you. You need to think. But the most obvious example that you face every time, every day, is the doors. Okay, how many of you confused when you try to push or pull a door? Okay, every time. We will do a research right now. Okay, so we will voting. I will show you different doors, and you need to raise your hand if you push, and after that I will ask, okay, who pulled this door? Also you raise your hand. Okay, but very important, you don't need to think. Okay, so don't think. Who pushed this door? Who pulled this door? Who pushed this one? Who pulled? Okay, who pushed this one? Who pulled? Who pushed this one? Who pulls? Okay, no. Who pushed this one? Who pulls? Okay. Did you recognize any pattern? Okay, probably on these 2 types of doors was the most obvious result, so everybody will try to push. This is okay. And with this, there was a hesitation. But probably the best solution or more closest solution is this. So if you want to push something, then you don't need to have this stuff, but if you pull, you need to this one. Okay, so believe it or not, this type of stuff can be extremely crucial. I said earlier that usability is the most business sensitive characteristic. Why? Because if you invest the usability, then your users will like it and the users will buy it. This is a quote from David Travis, and he said, "It's not unusual for usability projects to return benefits 5-10 times on their costs." So yes, if you design a new feature, or maybe you have business analytics or any other stuff, but there is an input which represents your user needs, you always need to think about usability, because later it will be much, much cheaper. I want to tell something about how you need to put the usability if you think about the testing and also the designing, because it is not obvious. So in the early days, like in waterfall, we plan something, we make something, and in the very end, we test something which is obviously extremely late. These bugs are usually the most expensive issues. And what I want to highlight that also nowadays, especially for the usability and the usability feedback comes from at the very end of the software process, so the software development. Usually, you get these confusion stuff from the users itself. So from the production, it's too late. If you want to improve the stuff, you need to plan and test from the usability point of view before any implementation. Okay, it's very important because many times, also I faced a company at Hungary who developed a draft application. It's a mobile banking or something like that. It was a financial stuff. And they developed a draft stuff with many screens. And I said, why didn't you try with prototypes, with paper or single skeletons? Why did you try to immediately implement? It's absolutely unnecessary. You can test your users and get feedback without any implementation, without any coding. Again, maybe it's obvious right now, but practically at the projects, they don't do, or if they do, after the implementation. It's absolutely unnecessary. And I said, okay, you get feedbacks, and after that, you need to redesign the whole experience. We will talk about later what the difference is between the user experience and the usability. But the point is, this stuff is a recurring event. Okay, so it's constantly repeating. And after that, if you reach a symbol, a level which is satisfied by the user, after that you can implement. Okay, and of course, the other type of testing has its own place, but it's very important that it's need to be before the implementation if you want to make it cheaper. Okay, I tried to find an image or graphic which represent the different parts of the usability testing. It's not the best one, but it's okay for the representation that the whole story is about you try to understand and diagnose your user needs, also through interviews. And nowadays, there are a lot of possibilities to use analytics, okay? Because not only through interviews are the best way actually, but nowadays everybody uses Google Analytics and you can implement some traffic storing methods, whatever. So this is also extremely important because those stuff are really objective. And after that you can test the variants, what you have, and finally if it's also approved through interviews, then you can implement. The whole story, what I described about we design something with papers, with skeletons, with screen prototypes, and test it, and again design it before any implementation begins, is the same as you find in lean methodologies. Who have you heard about lean? Okay, lean is an agile methodology, and startups often use it. If you have an idea, you need to make a minimum viable product. The minimum viable product, it could be a set of papers with user interface designs. These are definitely not draft applications. Okay, again, you can implement, but it's unnecessarily expensive. And you go to your future users and try to validate that, what do you think if you have this problem and we have a solution? Now it is a piece of paper, but this would be our solution. What will your feedback and so on? This is the same as the lean. And one slide about minimum viable product. It's very important that you need to focus to the user needs. And you need to iteratively improve your model like this. So there is a requirement that the user wants to go from A to B. And you try to carry out a solution. And based on your user feedback, you constantly improve your solution. And finally, you have a solution which reaches that level which is satisfying for the user. What do you think why this one is not okay? Even it's very typical in software projects. So user requirement is we want to go from A to B. And in the beginning, I figure out that we need a car. And incrementally, we develop a car. Let's assume that the result is the same. What is the difference? What is the difference? What do you think? Yes? Okay, many things. Yes, usability and?
It's illegal for the car. It doesn't solve the problem.
Okay, many things, and all of them were okay. In one sentence, in this journey, you know everything about the user needs, because constantly you get user feedback. Here, you figure out in the beginning, and you develop something. We assume that the result is the same, but 99% we cannot figure out. Okay, only the user knows what he wants to know. This is another great picture what I found, that in the daily software testing and development life, we try to build an application and ensure its quality. But it always needs to be extended, a design and a research from the usability point of view. Again, you need real user feedback. Without real user feedback, you have only assumptions and you figure out user needs without real feedbacks, which is easily a misconception. Okay, there are different principles in user experience and usability. I want to highlight some of them, which are, I think, these are interesting and useful. This is one image which collects a set of principles, and after that, I want to highlight some of them which I think it's useful and interesting. A product should be, or a feature should be findable. Okay, every time you need to face it. You try to find a functionality, and it's not easy to find. An application should be human. Okay, especially think about the communication style. If you communicate friendly, funny, humorous, close to the user, it improves the usability. Delightful, your product should be tasty. Okay, so when the users see the application, needs to say, okay, wow, I want to try it. Trustworthy, okay, honestly, and we need to make relationship. Okay, it's probably connected with the communication. Neat is simple. I will be extended it later in some slide. Easy, be consistent and clear. Okay, it's connected. And contextual. Probably your application will be used a specific context. Okay, you need to know this environment. because different users can behave differently in different environments. Later on, I will extend it. But I think, which is the most interesting, and for me was a point when we started this story, then it's need to be understood that the user is the boss. Okay, so I can figure out what are the main functionality, my product owner can figure out, the developers can figure out, but the reality and the truth is only at the user. So you need to trust and you need to constantly research the user needs. So we need to accept that we cannot figure out. This is the best picture which is represent what I see. So many times we try to implement 100 different features of the product. And most of the time we need to implement also those ones which represent the user needs. Believe or not, mostly the users wants to do a few things well. Only a few things well. Okay, the other stuff which is, I think everybody meet almost daily, a human is a feedback addict. Okay, you push a button and the Windows try to, thinking. What do you do after 10 seconds? You will push again. Why? Because you want to give feedback, okay? Get some feedback. Human is a feedback addict. Even an operation takes some time. You need to constantly provide feedback, and these feedback needs to be tested. If your application is responsive, then the overall usability will be higher. Okay, this is connected with a real project. This application supports 42 languages. 42 languages. And there was a team who tested this multi-language environment from the functional point of view. Okay, you have a button here, and the text was longer, then it's an issue, and so on. And most of the time, the best solution was if we simply replaced the text to pictograms. So it is, okay, there are some cases when it does not work, but mostly it's much easier to do with pictograms and pictures, and visually represented the ways are much better than the text, if it's possible. Another big thing for me that the user experience is different from the usability. The usability exists within the application, but you need to design earlier and for later. Let me tell you an example. We need to design on the first touch point when the user spots your product in an advertisement, okay, maybe in Facebook or in a sidebar. Because on that point can be important from the later purchasing and so on. So on the very first touch point, the very first meeting is also crucial. Let's assume that our users finish the usage and has a satisfaction, and after that meet a friend and referral that he refers these new applications, what they used just a few seconds ago. This is also a part of user experience. So it is wider, and it consists feelings and motivations, and usability itself only exists in the application. But I will extend it later. And the last principle, which is extremely crucial for me, is the minimalism. What do you think? Why this slide is better than this one? Have you ever seen this kind of PowerPoint slide? Obviously, this author wrote more information than this. Here is only one word, and here's a lot of words. The key is what I call the information noise ratio. So you need to highlight your information and decrease your noise as more as you can. Okay, if we reveal some usability issues, or we are in the very beginning of the project, and we try to design a great usability. These are brainstorming, thinking, paper stuff, and so on. I want to highlight really high level how it looks like. First, probably you have heard about personas. Personas, a persona is a typical user from a typical user group. First, what I experienced, firstly, these personas are assumption, but after that, based on feedbacks, so you need to go on their context, on their environment, where the real users exist, and need to ask what are your user needs. And based on the different user types, you need to define a persona. And do like this, so give a name, try to imagine his context. Let's assume we plan or design a TripAdvisor application, and we list some stuff about, okay, Joshua is 26 years old, travel 2 times a year, and so on, uses iPhone, social media, whatever. So we need to represent somehow our different user groups. Of course, there are more user groups usually. How? Sketch a name and try to describe behavioral and demographic information. Try to figure out pain points and needs. Okay, figure out, I mean you need to ask. And try to provide solutions. This is the way how you can define these kinds of personas. About experience, I said it starts earlier, and this is the user journey. The user journey comes from the very first experience of the user related to your product and ends when the very last experience, usually, hopefully, a referral or something like that. I have a better example. Let's take a car sharing application. Is there any car sharing service here in Moscow? Okay. Let's assume that we have only these 4 phases. We see the advertisement of this car sharing application somewhere, and we try to, we decided to join. This is a great feeling. Okay, I join. Try to reserve a car. Okay, register. Try to unlock and drive. If we describe the emotional path, it seems like this. In the beginning, okay, I'm happy. I want to join. When there is a responsibility, okay, there is a cost I want to reserve. At the car, I need to unlock. Okay, this is the most confusing part, maybe, the process. And when drive, then I'm happy again. And the story can be continued. Okay, so can refer to other friends, whatever. After the journey, we need to define the interface. And this was also new for me. Then this is not about that graphic designers from scratch design the pixel perfect user interfaces. It's not true. There is a recurring process again. 3 phases actually. The first phase when we design screens, but only for the workflow. We have no text, no colors. The ratios are okay, but the whole story in the first phase is about to design the workflow. How many screens and the high-level basic use cases workflows. The second phase, when you have text and when you have ratios. Here you need to have clickable parts, okay, if you do it electronically. And if it's verified again and again with users, then the graphic designers, or I don't know who, can design the pixel perfect design, okay. Based on these 3 phases, you will have better design than just from scratch designing pixel perfect design. Okay, and okay, how to test usability? I want to list for you some general methods and tricks, because obviously the best way is to interviewing the users. And you can get most of the feedback from here. Okay, I always say as an example as a mobile application, but you can test anything and not necessarily with the device. You can test also with papers. The thing is here, then you need to collect some users, representative users, ask them, then please think loudly. You need to record for the further analytics. And believe me, within a few hours, within a few days, in the beginning you need to invite only maximum 5 users. You will find the biggest pain of the users. This is again an example that the whole story is extremely cheap if you do before any implementation. Okay, so obviously this is the first technique. But there are some of them which I think can be interesting. If you want to research, is there any demand for a feature, you can put to your application without implementation. Why not? Sometimes you can face it at Facebook or even the Gmail, then there is a new function because you are selected for a small group, and when you click there, then it's not implemented yet because they measure the demand. Why not? Again, it's cheap and you get feedback. Maybe you think about, okay, but maybe it's a result is a dissatisfaction, but because of you need to select a small subset which is representative, it is not a big deal. This is also a cheap and effective method. If you have variants, we use usually at the pixel perfect designs. You can show your design to your users only for 5 seconds. And after that, ask about their opinions. What do you think, why it's important, this short time range? We want to test the first impression, because it cannot be fixed for the second time. It's cheap and effective. The analytical side, there are tons of applications which can provide heat maps, can define and what other parts are most interesting, what are not. These call for action buttons and the text of call for action buttons does matter. Again, this is probably, that was the most interesting for me. Have you ever faced really complex menu structures? So you cannot find anything. This is because the structure is not effective from the user point of view. How you fix it? Wrote to this post-it sticks every possible menu points and give to your users. Okay, how you can create groups from these submenus. And again, after 3, 4, 5 users, you will see what the user structure would be, or what menu structure would be beneficial for the users. Again, it's cheap, and maybe this kind of stuff you think, okay, I can find a menu structure. Yes, but probably it's different from the user needs. Okay, and A/B tests, I think everybody knows it. Then you can present more variations, at least 2 variations for the user, and you can measure the results. Why not? If you have already an application and you want to test a representation or slightly different things, then you need to do it. And why do we do the whole stuff? Okay, the usability, okay, I said business sensitive. Because there is a funnel. There is a funnel. You want to grab your users, you want to convert them to customers, and you want that they refer to your application. The whole story, if you have an application which is a web shop or whatever, its story is about this. And you need to constantly improve the user satisfaction in every stage. And if you focus for the usability, then you can grab more users in every stage, and you will have more customers and more revenue. This is the most typical for the web shops, but in every field this works. Okay, and finally, if you want to recognize something from this speech, that will be the usability is the most business sensitive stuff. It can be implemented in a cheap way, and believe me, it could be very beneficial. And finally, if you want to reach me, I will be here on this day until the conference ends, and you can reach me here and through LinkedIn, whatever you can find in the conference webpage, and we can change for the questions. So the official part is here and ends. So thank you, spasiba. We will change for the. Okay, just a small technical break. Okay.
Sorry, quick questions in.
Also for the audience. Yes.
Если кому-то понадобится микрофон, пожалуйста, поднимите руку, и я принесу.
But also from the microphone, you can ask. Okay, so the first one is how do you test usability of UI, so the user interface? As I said, if you there is an existing application through user interviews. So the user interviews are the best. So in the first round, that's all. If you have no user interface right now, then you need to design those prototypes in paper, or there are different applications for them. What parameters you use to test return on investment? I have an Excel table. I collected about what the costs were, and after that, the company measures the extra benefit. It's not clear, so I won't say it's okay, it's dollar perfect, but it does matter. So after that, persuade a new company is much easier than before that. And also there are researchers too. Is there any question about maybe the mic or Slido? Yes?
Hi, my name is Sam. For your presentation, and I have a question. You talked that it's better to develop a simple application, and after that, add some features. I agree, but I see one problem that the first integration of application are usually very simple and perfect, and after some time, product owner asks to add some features, some fields, and after some time, application become complete and it lose its usability. And how to pick up a point when we see that something's gone wrong, and what should we?
Okay, yeah, it's typical, and these new features and requests comes from any research, or just the product owner defines. Because usually this is that part what I said, that these inputs come from the business side and not from the user side. So even it's not at the beginning, also in the later phase, this happened again, that we figure out and not ask the users. So I think this is the root cause again. If an application too complex, then think about to make simpler or re-implement it. Might be think that, oh, it's extremely expensive, but not every time. If you use Mac OS, maybe you remember that for 5 years, they re-implement the whole Office program suite. Okay, the numbers and pages, they re-implement from the scratch. And if you compare the difference or the feature set between Excel and numbers, the difference is extremely huge. So there are examples when they said, okay, it's too complex, start from the scratch and focus on the usability. Is there any other question? Yes, you have.
It may sound funny, but it's relevant to me and citizens. We all know Windows XP. Most of us use it.
Yes.
And most of us are using Windows X. And for me, XP was useful. And
more experience.
And this is it's also usable, but I still prefer that one in the past. But they are in Windows X, they are going mobile, they are going tablet, and etc. etc. Could you expand on this? What your thoughts?
Okay, about the Microsoft and other companies' approach about the usability is what you can see, I think, is they started focus on usability a bit late. And if you see some products which are young, for example, there is a new code application, Visual Code maybe, which is a free coding application from Microsoft. It's much better than the earlier versions of Visual Studio, because probably it's implemented from the scratch and has a different ground. So I don't know what the root cause is, but probably is the difference of the early days of thinking. So they try to implement more and more features and more functions without thinking about usability, because they thought it's not important.
Yes, sorry. If you would have a chance to use Windows XP or use Windows X, which one?
Neither. So I don't want to use Windows. but I agree. When I used XP, was more responsive. That's why it's a bit better than 7. Okay. If you have no question, then thank you, спасибо.